He absorbed, adapted, and responded like a machine with a human heart. Each feint was calculated, every movement intentional. And then came the moment, a transition so fluid it looked like instinct. Oliveira went to the ground, but this wasn't his jungle anymore. It was Islam's ocean, and Charles couldn't swim. As the seconds passed, Islam tightened the noose, inch by inch, moment by moment. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't hunting a highlight. He was enforcing inevitability. Oliveira, a submission artist of legendary caliber, had no answers. And then it happened. A choke that was more than a technique, it was a statement. Oliveira tapped, not from exhaustion, not from fear, but from the realization that he had been outclassed in his own domain. The jiu-jitsu king had been dethroned by a wrestler, not just any wrestler, the one we had all been warned about. The crowd exploded, but Islam was silent. His celebration was not in roars, but in reverence. He lifted the belt not just as a champion, but as a messenger, a fulfillment of Abdulmanap's vision. A torch lit long ago in the mountains had now reached the summit of the world. And Khabib, he climbed over the cage, just like old times, wrapped his arms around Islam and whispered, "Father's plan is complete." And in that moment, the story wasn't about punches or submissions. It was about legacy. A son for a father, a friend for a brother, a dream turned destiny. But greatness, true greatness, does not rest. Because with the belt comes the weight. And as Islam stood atop the mountain, a new question echoed through the sport. Could he stay there? Champions fall not in the cage, but in comfort. But Islam was different. The fire didn't dim, it roared louder. He didn't just want to defend his title, he wanted to redefine what it meant to hold it. The goal wasn't just legacy anymore, it was immortality. They gave him Volkanovski next, pound for pound #1, a monster disguised in a featherweight's frame, a man with no fear, only fire. He moved up in weight to chase greatness, and the world watched with held breath. Many thought Islam would struggle, that Volk's pressure, his pace, his power might be too much. But Islam wasn't intimidated. He saw it for what it was, another name, another war, another mountain. And so he trained harder than ever, sharpened every weapon, readied every tool, because he knew what was at stake wasn't just his title, but his throne. When the fight began, it felt like watching two titans test reality. Volkanovski never backed down. He pushed, pressured, and even hurt Islam. For the first time in his career, the Dagestani champion looked human, bloodied, breathing heavy. Questions surfaced. Was this the beginning of the end? But Islam dug deeper, not into his conditioning, but into his soul. He rallied, shifted, landed the bigger shots, secured the control. The rounds piled on, and when the final bell rang, both men raised their hands. But there was only one belt, and it stayed where it belonged. That night didn't just prove Islam's dominance. It revealed something far more dangerous: resilience. Anyone can dominate when they're on top, but to bleed, to falter, and still prevail, that's the mark of a legend. Volkanovski had pushed him to the edge of the abyss, and Islam didn't fall. He climbed out, took control, and reminded the world why he wears the crown. It wasn't his best performance, but it was his most important. But champions aren't judged by moments, they're judged by eras. And Islam knew that to be truly great, one win wasn't enough. He needed to keep dismantling the very fabric of the division. He wanted names, legends, killers. And when Dustin Poirier stepped up, the world salivated. Poirier was the people's champ, a man baptized in fire, rebuilt in wars, and feared by everyone except Islam. The lead-up was quiet, no trash talk, just two fighters heading into battle, fully aware that someone would leave changed. From the opening minute, it was chaos. Poirier came to break the myth. He landed, he cut, he hurt Islam in ways no one ever had. For the first time, we saw the Dagestani giant struggle, his nose bloodied, his breath sharp, his eyes searching. But what separates warriors from champions isn't skill, it's will. Islam absorbed the punishment, calculated the chaos, and then turned it. By round 5, he found the opening. a submission so crisp, so brutal, it looked rehearsed. And Poirier, the man who never breaks, tapped. Not from weakness, but from recognition. After the fight, the cameras tried to capture the moment, but what they couldn't catch was the realization in everyone's eyes. Islam hadn't just won, he had survived hell, and still emerged the hammer, not the nail. He didn't smile, he didn't gloat, he just nodded. Because deep down he knew, legends aren't made in cages, they're made in fire. And his fire, it had just begun to burn. Before fighters ever face Islam in the cage, they fight him in their heads. He's not just an opponent, they describe him as something else entirely. A puzzle that won't crack, a shadow that won't move, a pressure that won't lift. Some even say they start losing days before the cage door locks. Because Islam doesn't just prepare for fights, he prepares to break people, quietly, methodically, like he's walking them into a slow, controlled drowning. They know what's coming, and still, they can't stop it. That's the terrifying part. When inevitability replaces hope, you're already halfway to defeat. There's a phrase that's been whispered in gyms, podcasts, and backstage corridors. There are levels to this, and Islam isn't on yours. That isn't trash talk. It's truth spoken by men who've bled in that cage. They describe his grip like steel cables, his top control like a cement blanket, his timing like he's inside your thoughts. Even elite fighters, world-class athletes, admit they couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. That's not just dominance, that's psychological collapse. It's one thing to get beaten, it's another to realize you were never in the fight to begin with. Even the commentators have run out of ways to describe him. Most complete fighter on the roster, the air and the evolution. A nightmare for anyone. And yet, those words still fall short, because what Islam represents isn't just about techniques or titles. It's about inevitability. The sense that no matter how good you are, no matter what you throw, he's already planned for it. Like he's fighting you with a memory of the future, as if he's read the final chapter and you're still on page 1. That's what makes him terrifying. Not what he does, but how certain he is of what will happen. There's a story that circles around, half legend, half truth, of Islam during training camp, sparring with 3 different opponents, one after the other, without taking a break. Each one fresh, each one skilled, and he still dominated. Didn't gasp for air, didn't slow down. When asked later why he trains like that, his answer was simple. Because in the cage, I don't want to wonder if I'm ready. I want to know I've already been deeper than this. That's not preparation, that's obsession, and that's the edge no one can teach. And while others chase glory, fame, or pay-per-view numbers, Islam chases something colder, cleaner, legacy. He doesn't call out names, doesn't need to. They come to him now, chasing a title, a paycheck, or redemption. But what they find is something different. They find themselves face to face with a mirror, one that doesn't lie. And in that reflection, under the lights, with millions watching, they don't see themselves as champions. They see themselves as prey. And Islam? Just another day at the office. The scariest part? He's not even angry. There's no rage in his punches, no hatred in his submissions. He fights with the calm of a surgeon, the precision of a sniper, the conviction of a monk. And when it's over, he helps his opponent up, thanks them, respects them. Because for Islam, dominance isn't personal, it's ritual, a ceremony where one man's will is tested and another's is proven unbreakable. Ask any of his opponents about the aftermath, about the hours after the lights dim. They'll talk about the silence, the bruises that don't fade, the mental fog that lingers for weeks. Some say they question their careers. Others admit they'd never felt pressure like that before, not even in title fights. Because fighting Islam isn't just 5 rounds, it's an unraveling, a slow realization that maybe, just maybe, your best wasn't good enough, and might never be. Analysts have tried to dissect him, study film, track habits, break down stats. But the truth is, Islam isn't a riddle to solve. He's a system to endure, a style so complete it loops back into simplicity. You know he's going to take you down. You know he's going to suffocate your space. You know the choke is coming, and still, you're powerless to stop it. That's not a strategy. That's a sentence. What makes it even more haunting is how little he cares about the spotlight. He doesn't chase cameras, doesn't sell beef. He'll do the press because he has to, but he saves his real statements for the cage. That's where he speaks fluently, through silence, through dominance, through finishes that feel less like fights and more like inevitabilities reaching their conclusion. And when the cage closes behind him, it's already too late for whoever stands across. Yet despite all this, Islam remains grounded, still training with the same team, still honoring the legacy of Abdulmanap, still praying 5 times a day, still climbing those mountains back home when the world thinks he's resting. Because to Islam, greatness isn't a destination, it's a path. And every day he walks it with the same quiet promise, that no matter who you are, where you're from, or how high you've climbed, when you meet him inside that cage, you will understand. This isn't sport, this is consequence. There was a time when people questioned if Islam Makhachev even deserved a title shot. He hadn't faced the top 5, they said. He was living in Khabib's shadow, they claimed. He hadn't proved himself. But what they didn't see was that Islam was never trying to prove anything to the public. He was proving it to a promise, one made in a dusty gym years ago, to a father figure who believed he could be the greatest. The critics saw a silent contender, but Dagestan saw a king in waiting. And now everyone else finally sees it too. With each victory, Islam hasn't just won belts, he's rewritten the rules. The division that was once seen as striker-heavy has now been flipped on its head. Every top contender is forced to ask the same haunting question: can I survive the takedown? And most of them can't. Islam has done more than dominate. He's forced evolution. Fighters now train differently. Game plans are built with him in mind. He's the standard. In the terrifying part, he's not slowing down. If anything, he's only now entering his prime. But what truly separates Islam isn't just what he does, it's how he does it. There's no drama, no scandals, no excuses, just discipline, just execution. When others celebrate wins with lavish parties, Islam returns to the grind. When reporters ask what's next, he says, "Whoever is ready." There's a purity to his mindset, a simplicity that's almost alien in today's world of call-outs and controversy. And maybe that's why fans are so drawn to him. He's not chasing fame, he's chasing mastery. Behind the scenes, his camp speaks in hushed tones about his obsession. He watches film like a detective. He drills until the mats are stained with sweat. He trains with the hunger of a rookie, not the entitlement of a champion. Some days his coaches have to pull him off the mats, worried he's overtraining, but he only smiles. Better to break now than break in the cage, he says. That's the mentality. That's what makes him more than a fighter. It's what makes him a problem no one has found an answer to. And for young fighters in Dagestan, he's become more than a role model. He's a map, a real-world example of what's possible when faith meets fire. They watch his fights on cracked screens in village gyms. They copy his movements. They whisper his name during sprints up snowy hills. Islam isn't just their hero, he's their blueprint. And unlike many champions, he hasn't forgotten them. He returns home often, trains with the kids, reminds them that greatness isn't a mystery, it's a habit, one built over thousands of hours, and one they too can earn. But with greatness comes pressure, and Islam feels it, even if he rarely shows it. Every time he walks into the cage, he's not just fighting for himself. He carries a country, a community, a legacy. And somewhere in that crowd, whether physically or spiritually, he feels Abdulmanap's eyes watching, judging, guiding. That burden could break most men. But Islam wears it like armor, because he knows pressure is just another form of weight. And he's been carrying weight his whole life. It's that pressure that sharpens his focus. You can see it in his eyes on fight night. Cold, measured, already a few moves ahead. His opponents bring chaos, and he brings calm. They throw combinations. He reads intentions. They panic. He flows. And when he finds the opening, he doesn't strike like a brawler. He operates like a chess master who's finally sprung the trap. That's why his fights feel less like brawls and more like executions. Clinical, controlled. unavoidable. And yet, despite all the precision, there's something deeply spiritual about the way he fights. Every time he steps into the cage, he prays, not for victory, but for peace, for protection, for the chance to test himself in the fire. Islam doesn't believe in luck. He believes in preparation and faith. And when you combine those two things, what you get isn't a fighter. You get a force of nature, something that can't be reasoned with, only respected or feared. Still, there are always new challengers, new names rising with momentum, swagger, and hope. They come with undefeated records, viral knockouts, and bold predictions. And every time fans wonder, could this be the one? But Islam doesn't wonder. He watches, prepares, and then delivers. These fighters bring dreams to the cage. Islam brings nightmares. And by the end, those dreams turn to dust. Because beating Islam isn't about power or hype. It's about surviving inevitability. And that, so far, no one has managed to do. As the UFC lights grow brighter, as the hype machines spin louder, Islam remains unmoved, unchanged. And that might be his greatest strength. He isn't swayed by fame. He doesn't chase applause. He's still that boy from the mountains, quiet, relentless, devout. He just happens to be the most dangerous man in the world now. And he knows it. But he also knows this. Greatness isn't about being better than others. It's about being better than yourself every single day. And in that pursuit, Islam Makhachev is undefeated. To understand Islam Makhachev, you must understand Dagestan. Not just the geography, but the philosophy. The land shapes its people, rugged, cold, unforgiving, but beautiful too in the way that struggle becomes a teacher. In Dagestan, pain is not an enemy. It's an old friend. It molds boys into men, and men into warriors. Islam grew up among men who worked with their hands, prayed with their hearts, and fought like their bloodline depended on it. Because in many ways it did. And every time he steps into the octagon, he carries all of it, his people, his past, and his pride. There's a saying in the mountains, to walk alone is strength, but to walk for others is destiny. Islam never set out to be famous. He set out to be faithful, to a plan, to a teacher, to a code. Abdulmanap didn't just coach fighters, he raised men. He taught them that ego was poison, that humility was armor, and that discipline was freedom. Islam listened, not because he understood at the time, but because he trusted. And that trust grew into a legacy, one that now spans continents, headlines, and generations. But make no mistake, it was born in silence, in sweat, in unseen work. In today's world, fighters build brands. Islam built a brotherhood. His camp isn't just a team, it's a family. Khabib, Usman, Umar, all cut from the same cloth, sewn with the same threads of sacrifice and belief. When one fights, all prepare. When one wins, all rise. It's a structure forged by values, not contracts. Loyalty isn't negotiated, it's embedded. That's why Islam never walks alone. He may enter the cage solo, but behind him are warriors who've bled with him, trained with him, and would fight for him if rules allowed. It's not marketing, it's the soul of Dagestan. People often ask, what drives a man who already has it all? Titles, fame, wealth, respect. But for Islam, the answer is disarmingly simple. He doesn't believe he's done. Greatness in his eyes isn't a trophy. It's a trail, one that keeps stretching forward, always uphill. He doesn't measure himself by what's behind him, but by the version of himself he hasn't reached yet. That's why his training never softens, why his hunger never fades. Because Islam isn't trying to be better than the world. He's trying to be better than the man in yesterday's mirror. But even the strongest hearts have scars. The loss of Abdulmanap still lingers in every training session, every fight camp, every walk to the cage. That silence, the one that follows victory, is sometimes filled with memories of what could have been said, what could have been shared. Islam carries that grief not as a burden, but as a compass. Every punch he throws, every opponent he silences, is a tribute, not just to a coach, but to a father figure who believed in him before the world ever did. Some fight for belts. Islam fights for something no belt can measure. And maybe that's why his story resonates far beyond the octagon. Because in him, we see more than a champion. We see a son honoring his father, a student fulfilling a promise, a quiet soul rising in a world that rewards noise. His success isn't just admired, it's felt. It reminds people that you don't need flash to be fierce, that silence can be louder than any scream, that consistency, discipline, and faith can take you further than arrogance ever could. Islam is proof that the old ways, though quiet, still work. There's poetry in the way he moves, no wasted energy, no panicked flurry, just control. Every exchange is a calculated equation, every takedown a form of expression. He's not fighting for chaos, he's conducting a symphony, a brutal, beautiful performance where every movement has purpose. In a sport where emotions often run wild, Islam remains the calm in the storm. And it's that calm that undoes his opponents. They come in roaring, raging, and ready for war. He meets them with stillness, and in that stillness, they begin to fall apart. Even outside the cage, he moves with precision. He speaks only when it matters, doesn't chase attention, lets it follow him, doesn't seek validation, earns it. And when he does speak, it's never about how great he is. It's about how great the mission is, how great the responsibility, because he understands something many champions forget. The belt is not the destination. It's a reminder to keep walking, to keep evolving, to stay hungry even when the world says you've already eaten enough. For the fans, Islam is many things: a warrior, a technician, a ghost of Khabib's past, a giant of Dagestan's present. But more than that, he's a symbol of discipline in an age of shortcuts, of humility in a time of noise, of resilience when the world expects collapse. And every time he steps into the cage, he reminds us of something we often forget: that greatness isn't about being better than others. It's about becoming the person you were born to be and having the courage to never stop. And yet, as the lights shine brighter and the legacy grows larger, one truth remains: Islam Makhachev is not done, not even close. He hasn't peaked. He hasn't plateaued. He's still chasing something only he can see. And that's what makes him terrifying. Because when a man who's already conquered the mountain says he's still climbing, you'd better believe there's another summit no one else has dared to reach. In Islam, he's already halfway there. The world watches now, not just as fans, but as witnesses to history. Every fight Islam enters is no longer just a contest, it's a chapter. Each opponent is another name etched into the stone of his growing monument. But with each win, the stakes climb. The room for error narrows. Because when you're known for domination, anything less than perfection feels like betrayal. That's the cruel irony of greatness. It raises expectations beyond reality. But Islam, he doesn't flinch. He embraces it. Because he didn't ask to be ordinary. He was forged to be different. Whispers have begun again about new challengers, hungry wolves with knockout power, submission games, iron chins. They come from every corner: Brazil, the US, Australia, the Caucasus. Some are young and wild, others seasoned and cunning, but all carry one shared ambition: to be the one who solves the Islam equation, the one who rewrites the script, the one who finally stops the man from the mountains. But ambition alone isn't enough, because Islam isn't just an obstacle. He's a trial by fire, and not everyone walks out of fire. There's talk of rematches, of legacy bouts, of super fights that break records and logic. Could Volkanovski return for revenge? Could Dustin climb once more for redemption? Could a new dark horse rise from the shadows, unseen, unscouted, untamed? The options swirl like smoke, but Islam doesn't chase names. He prepares, he watches, he waits. Because for him, the true fight is never against a man. It's against time, against doubt, against the moment his body may slow, but his mind refuses to yield. That's what he trains for, that moment, and it hasn't arrived, not yet. The UFC has never seen someone quite like him, not just in skill, but in spirit. Islam's presence transcends marketing. He doesn't speak in sound bites. He speaks in silences that make people lean forward. He doesn't sell rivalries. He reveals realities. He doesn't build narratives. He breaks them. Every time he walks into the octagon, a question is asked. What if this is the night? And every time the answer is the same. Not tonight. Not yet. Not him. In press conferences, his words are measured, his demeanor still. But behind those quiet eyes is a storm, a fire that's been burning since childhood, a hunger that belts can't satisfy. You can't coach that. You can't buy that. It's not born in gyms. It's born in hardship, and it only survives in men who fear comfort more than pain. That's why Islam never settles, because he knows the second you settle, the mountain starts crumbling beneath your feet. He trains like a man who hasn't made it, eats like a man in camp, sleeps like a man who's not yet earned rest. Every detail is sharpened, every weakness interrogated. He studies not just his opponents, but himself, obsessively, not for flaws to fear, but for opportunities to evolve. Champions defend what they have. Legends chase what they haven't yet reached. That's the difference. In Islam, he's not defending. He's still hunting. Fans debate his greatness in bars, online forums, in gym locker rooms. Is he better than Khabib? Is he the most complete lightweight in history? Could he beat the greatest of all time? But while they argue, Islam trains, because legacy isn't decided by headlines. It's etched by time. And in that silence, he's building something bigger than belts or records. He's building a legend that will echo long after the lights dim and the crowds disperse. Younger fighters call him a blueprint. Analysts call him a system. Opponents call him a nightmare. But Islam? He calls himself a student, still learning, still pushing, still unsatisfied. And that might be the most dangerous thing about him. He's not fighting like a man on top of the world. He's fighting like someone who believes he hasn't even arrived. And if that's true, then the sport hasn't seen his final form. Not even close, and so the question lingers, not in his mind, but in ours. How do you stop a man who doesn't stop? A man who doesn't celebrate his wins because he's already moved past them? A man who doesn't fear losing because he's already faced the worst parts of himself in silence, in training, in prayer? The answer remains elusive, because Islam isn't fighting for glory, he's fighting for meaning. And meaning, that never fades. Now picture this. The lights drop, the arena hushes, a name echoes through the speakers, not shouted, but whispered like folklore. Islam Makhachev. The cage closes. Across from him, a new face, new eyes, full of fire, full of hope. But as the ref signals go, there's a flicker in those eyes, a flicker that says, he's real. The myth is real. And just before the first strike is thrown, the audience realizes they're not watching a fight, they're watching inevitability in motion. And what happens next? That's for the next story.